Sarah Nowlin is next up. Hi, Sarah, how are you? Can't hear you. Sarah has been committed to educating and empowering others for nearly 20 years. As a professor of communication at Marist College, she teaches persuasion and influence to students and how best to apply them to their everyday lives, as well as their future careers. Sarah also delivers trainings and keynotes on leadership and personal development, including New York City Mayor's Office, National Urban Fellows, and Lehigh University. When she isn't teaching, Sarah is often binging political dramas like House of Cards, Madam Secretary, and West Wing on Netflix. Ah, political. You're political. That's awesome. And it's time for us to hear your presentation. I'm really looking forward to it. Get a yes to your request. How to influence others without authority. Wow, that just sounds like a really useful thing to learn how to do. Sarah, you ready to take over?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Can you see your screen?
I can see your screen and I can see you. It's all you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cynthia.
You're welcome.
So I want to ask you all, and I'm going to invite you to raise your hand again. I know John just tested you on your skills of raising your hand digitally. So if you've ever been in a meeting, you've been the leader of a group project, you've been sitting around the table, maybe it's even been a Toastmaster meeting, and you're asking for volunteers, and everyone starts looking down, gets really busy and really interested in what's on their piece of paper, maybe on their phone, and you start to panic. Raise your hand if you've ever had that kind of experience. Yeah, so we're getting a few people who, yes, have had that experience. It happens. Most of the time, we can resolve it if we have some level of authority, right? We get a yes in some way, shape, or form because we have the power to promote people, to give people raises. You know, if you're a boss, fire them, or if you're a parent, you can punish, right? So there's some level when we have authority to reward or to punish. Now, when it comes to no authority, most of the time, we're just left crossing our fingers, hoping that maybe pleading that someone says yes. Or maybe we just go to those default people that we know will always say yes. I know I have done that. And I've even been the person who has lone soldiered it and been the one who has tried to do it on my own versus trying to ask for help, right? So if you've experienced any of these, right, this program is to help you break free from those default ways and use rules of influence. So when we have no authority, like in Toastmasters in a volunteer organization or with coworkers, we have these rules of influence that can help us through and make sure that we get a yes to our requests. Now, oftentimes these particular strategies are used by salespeople, so I'll give you some examples of how salespeople use them. You can even see some of your kids, maybe it's your kids that are super savvy and have figured out a way to get their needs met through these rules of influence, or perhaps it's some of your friends' friends, your kids' friends. So you're having, there's a lot of ways that people have learned how to use these rules of influence. So now how can we use them for Toastmasters? How can we use them in our clubs, in our companies, or in our communities? So these rules of influence come from theories upon theories and studies and research and persuasion. And I can totally geek out on this because it's really fascinating to me as a professor of communication. But it's a Saturday morning and I still haven't started my semester yet. So I'm going to give you guys a break on that. And there's been a book that I've used with my class when I teach persuasion. Robert Cialdini's book, which is a great read, and we're going to utilize some of those rules of influence that he speaks about. He calls them weapons of influence, actually. And this book is the book that you'll be able to win at the end of this seminar, so stay tuned so you can be one of those, possibly one of those raffle winners. The ones that I think that are going to be the most helpful for you are these 3 rules. We're going to talk about rule of reciprocity, the rule of liking, and the rule of commitment and consistency. So before we dive into these rules, I want to make sure that this is of the most valuable to you. So you can take a moment, find a sheet of paper, maybe pull up a Word document on your screen or notes or whatever you have as a way to scribe something down, write something down. And I want you to think about a place where you would want to be more effective in getting a yes to your request. It could be in Toastmasters. Maybe it's getting people to sign up for the upcoming speech contest. Maybe it's getting people to sign up for meeting roles within Toastmasters. Or you're looking down the way and you want to have people sign up for being an officer. Or it could be within your company or within your community, whatever that is for you. Take a moment and write that down, because I want you to see, you're going to get a chance after each rule is described and explained to see how you could apply it to that area. So I want you to be clear about this area that you want to tackle so that you can be more effective and really apply each of these rules to that area. So take a moment now and write that down. All right, so now that you have this area in mind, I want you to look to see how you can apply these rules. The first rule is the rule of reciprocity. And sometimes I like to call it the gift of obligation, because we really do have this automatic need that comes up when we are given something that we need to repay it, right? It can be a gift, it can be something physical, or it could be done in a favor or just something nice that someone has done. We have that need to repay it. It's that reciprocity. It comes from our DNA of being this interdependent society, communities that we've developed, that we really need each other. So when we've received something, we want to give back. And Cialdini really calls it one of the most powerful weapons of influence because it is so strong in our DNA. That repayment can show up, typically it is similar in size. So if someone gives you something big, then you want to give something of equal size. And typically it's of the same format, right? So if someone gives you a gift, you want to give a gift back. If someone takes you to dinner or buys you a coffee, then you want to repay in kind. So this in kind element really will come into play, and you'll find that you'll want to give back what's been given to you. And what's important to just pay attention to is the larger the gift is, or the larger the favor is, the longer that obligation lives on, right? So if it's something small, then it may last for a week, perhaps more. But if it's something bigger, then it may last even a lifetime, right? So you want to think about, if you are going to use this powerful weapon to your advantage to get a yes, you want to think about the size with regard to when you're going to need something from them, right? So, and think about that size and format, right? So if you are going to need them to volunteer for a Toastmaster role, then you should probably think about volunteering in some other way that is similar. So you want to think about reciprocity in that size and format as you begin to conjure up how you want to use it yourself. So how does this get used in the real world, right? How many of us love to go to Costco and eat all the free samples that they have throughout their store, right? So part of, or maybe it's the food court, or you love going to the fragrance section of Macy's and picking up all the samples. Free samples are great, but part of what shows up is that those free samples have us feel obligated to, in some way, shape, or form, to listen to their spiel, or to possibly even buy their product. So there is some level of obligation that we get a sense of when we accept something for free. Oftentimes when I talk to my students about this, they talk about the people in the middle of the kiosk mall who are always trying to offer them free things or talk to them. And so they don't want to feel that sense of obligation, so they actually try and hide away from it. So this obligation does feel very real, right? It could even show up on social media or in your email. Hey, sign up for this thing and get free tips on how to become a better business person. So it shows up in a lot of different ways. When we also can see that it could show up in favors, right? You may have a really savvy kid who knows that when they want something, that they're going to start becoming extra helpful in the house, right? They're going to volunteer to do things they typically would never do because they want to bank up those favors. That's how you can start to think about using reciprocity with regard to getting a yes from someone. Is how can you bank up favors for someone, or bank up good credit, reciprocity credit for these people. You can even find, I find sometimes that if someone has done something nice to me as a stranger, that you can't really repay them back, that you find people doing what's called paying it forward, right? So if someone holds the door for you, you are more likely to hold the door for someone else, right? So reciprocity can also show up in paying it forward as well. And one of the things I found myself in the middle of a reciprocity dynamic was when I was flying back from California just this week, back to New York, and I was encountered with the TSA security. So with the government shutdown, the TSA security are working without pay. They are obligated to be there and sacrificing pay at this moment for our security. And I felt obligated to do something for them as a thank you. And I was the whole ride down to the airport, I was trying to figure out what that could be. And I was like, well, maybe I can get them coffee. So as I went through, I found a TSA worker and I said, hey, is it possible? I really want to appreciate you guys working when you're not getting paid. Can I get you a cup of coffee? And unfortunately, they said, no, we can't accept anything for security purposes. And so I was left with this debt of obligation, this feeling that I couldn't repay them as a thank you, right? So we can feel these opportunities come and go. And what you can really do is start to tweak it so that you can use it to your advantage rather than feeling this sense of obligation. So how can this apply to Toastmasters? Well, we are in contest season. So I know that our district trio is probably happy I'm mentioning this. So within our speech contests, there may be ways that you can gather some favors and build some credit by volunteering for certain roles. The bigger the role, the more credit you get, the bigger the favor is. So think about how you can build that part in so that you can ask these people later for a favor of your own. And the benefit of also this, right, as leaders, by you volunteering, by you stepping up, you are setting the tone and demonstrating that everyone pitches in at Toastmasters and to make it all happen. So you create that sense of teamwork, you create that sense of community. So it really works in multiple ways. So think about how you could use this rule of reciprocity for your yes. So go back to your area, think about how you could apply it to this particular area that you have chosen. If it's with a particular person, maybe you want to build some credit with them by taking them out for a cup of coffee. If it's after a Toastmaster meeting or before a Toastmaster meeting, perhaps it's setting them up and helping them in some way, shape, or form, right? So it could be a favor, it could be taking them to lunch. It could be, even if you have a big team project and you want to get more yeses, bring some donuts, bring some coffee, bring some dessert, some treat. It's amazing what adults can do when they get a little bit of sugar in them. They're all excited. So think about ways that you can use this rule of reciprocity and write that down right now. And let me pause here and say, if you found a way that you can use rule of reciprocity, raise your hand, use the hand raise function now, and just let me know if you've been able to find a way that you can use rule of reciprocity. Awesome, fantastic. Now, if you get stuck at either this rule or any of the other rules, add it as a question and we'll try and answer it when we get to the Q&A section. So feel free, if you get stuck of how can I apply this particular rule to my situation, I'm happy to share with you at the end. All right, so the rule of liking. We say yes to people that we like. It's as simple as that. If they're a stranger, we have no problem saying no to them. If they are someone we know, and especially someone we like, it makes it really hard to say no, right? So it's all about building relationships. How can we get more people to like us? How can we get more people to feel too awkward to say no in a particular situation? So when it comes to these building of these relationships, right, there's a lot of theory and research behind it, even though we've heard it throughout, right? So now you know that there is scientific evidence to this, and you're not just hearing an old adage, but it's really about connecting with people. And when we connect with people, those people feel seen. And that's really the value of this, of building relationships, being seen. People like to be seen. One of the things I found is this to be the most powerful weapon when it comes to my teaching. So one of the main reasons why I feel like I am successful in my classroom and really getting students to engage and getting students to work hard is because I make it personal. By the first few weeks of class, I know their names. I say hello to them when I'm in the hallway and call them by name and talk to them about their extracurriculars, their activities that they're up to, and really building those relationships. And I found that that's not always the case. A lot of them experience other professors who just don't know their names even by the end of the semester. So by making that effort, I found that they work hard in my class, and my classes are pretty difficult, but they're willing to work hard with minimal, and I say minimal complaint. For the most part, they don't complain that much. So it's really important to be able to build those relationships. In Toastmasters, I do it by making sure that I acknowledge everyone by name when I see them. I greet new guests and build relationships with them. And we find that when we do that, guests join, become members, members stay, veterans stay. It's a much more effective and much more cohesive community, right? So if you know that you do that in your Toastmaster club, you probably notice that there is more community that gets created and people feel a part of something. And when people feel a part of something, they're more likely to stay. So you may not be an extrovert. You may not be someone who goes out of their way to say hello to everyone. I am not a natural extrovert. And there may be some of you who know me who are like, I don't believe it. It actually was a learned skill. It's not something that I came naturally with, and I consciously choose to put myself out there because I know the benefits of it. So if you're not an extrovert, that's fine. Go ahead and try it anyways. Put yourself out there and take that risk because it makes a big difference. So how else can you build liking? Oh, before we go on, sorry, I forgot this part. So you can make your request specifically personal. And I do this, and I recommend this because as we get busier and busier, we find that we make blanket requests out to a large group of people. We may send an email to the entire club asking for volunteers. We are much more successful when we ask directly. Ask someone specific. Ask them rather than asking a group of people. You're more like, you feel more on the hook, especially if you like this person, to be able to say yes or no. So you want to make sure you make that request direct. And ideally, the more in person, the more face-to-face you can make it, the better. Face-to-face makes it harder for someone to say no. The phone, and then obviously you've got email at the end if you don't have access to their phone. But you want to make sure that you try and make it as personal as possible to get the best results for your request. All right, so how else do you build liking? You can build it in similarities. Find commonalities with these people. Look for similar hobbies. Look for similar careers, right? So you find that oftentimes you like more people that do the same kind of job as you, or once you find someone who's a Toastmasters, there's an automatic liking to them. I found that John, our technical director, has been involved in a similar personal development program with me, and with that came an automatic increase in liking. So similarities play a big role in just increasing liking. So the more commonality you find with someone, the more they will like you. You can also use association. Now, some of you may know that I'll call myself a second-generation Toastmaster. So my father has been involved with Toastmasters since before I was in the womb. It's part of my DNA, and he's been heavily involved at the international level for the last 30 years. And it's weird to say, but he was somewhat of a celebrity for a large period of time. And what I have found is that by calling myself the daughter of Herb Nowlin, then people's body language automatically changes. If they know him, they're like, oh. So they become more interested in what I have to say because of my association. Now, of course, I need to be mindful of this so I don't come off as an entitled child. So you need to play with the association with a certain level of caution, and so that you don't overutilize your association. But it is a way that you can build a certain level of liking. So you want to make sure that if you can use it, put it in your toolbox and pull it out at an appropriate time. And one other way to build liking is complimenting. Now, I know it's simple, but it is super effective. You compliment people on external or internal qualities. I recommend internal so it doesn't get weird. Complimenting people on their externals can sometimes get you into trouble. So just focusing on the internal is helpful. But I find for myself, I am such a sucker, even though I know that people are complimenting me to get something out of me, I still feel myself more obligated and harder to say no. I have students who sometimes need a signature for me to what we call override into my class, right? So my class is full and they want to get into my class. So I'll get students who come to me and say, oh, my friend told me that you're such a great teacher. Oh, I would love to have you and learn from you, right? So again, ego gets boosted. I even have a student say, oh my God, those are the best shoes ever, right? Again, ego gets boosted and it's harder for me to say no. I know they're buttering me up, but it's still part of the psychology, right? So we feel better about ourselves we're happier, we're more likely to say yes. So you can use this to your advantage, right? If you have a request, boost that person's ego, compliment them on perhaps a job well done that would serve them, or knowing that they would do a great job. So if it's in Toastmasters, you could say something like, hey, I know that you have competed in contests before and you know what a good speech is. Would you be willing to be a contest judge this season when it comes to our division contest? By giving them that boost that they know what a speech is, that they've done really well, they will more likely say yes. So I want you to go back to your area. Where can you use the rule of liking? Where can you compliment? Where can you find commonality? Where can you make it personal? Where can you use association? And if you found a way that you can utilize it, go ahead and raise your hand. And if your hand's already raised, awesome. And then once you're done, you can unraise your hand. So you can just unclick that same button, that same icon. Awesome. Very cool. All right, so our last rule is the rule of commitment and consistency. And this particular rule gets a little complicated, so I'm going to try and explain it a little bit and then share some examples. I even have a study. I did get a little geeky and I'm sharing a research study with you, but it'll help clarify this particular rule. So when it comes to commitment and consistency, we personally have a strong desire to be consistent and to behave in accordance to what we've committed, right? We have personal pressures and social pressures that come through to create that desire for consistency, right? We want to be seen as reliable. We want to be seen as trustworthy, right? So not only do we want that for ourselves, but we want to be seen in that way, right? Being reliable, trustworthy, those are things that are highly valued in our society, even within Toastmasters. Integrity is one of our values, right? Honoring our word. So this is an important piece. And because of this societal value, commitment and consistency play a large role, tandem role with each other. So once people have committed to something, then they are more likely to be consistent with it. Now you may be thinking, you got New Year's resolutions here. This is like notoriously the thing that people are not consistent with, right? It's the second week of January. People have already blown their New Year's resolutions. Maybe even the second day of January, resolutions are done. But part of that is because we need to optimize the conditions of that particular commitment, right? So when we have New Year's resolutions, we have certain conditions that help us be more impactful and others that may not. So let's talk about those optimal conditions. And I know that Don Smith is going to talk more about commitment in our next session, so I do apologize if this is jumping on anything of Don's, but I do want to see how we can utilize this both personally as well as, but more importantly, how to get that yes, how to get someone else to commit and have them fulfill and deliver on that commitment. So the first one is active, right? So it needs to be something that is not just done in your head. Yeah, in my head, I said, I'm going to lose weight for 2019. That doesn't quite work the same way as that if you're active and you write it down or you put it on a vision board or you post it on social media, whatever that is, whatever activity, making it active makes it more effective. Making it public makes it more effective, right? Telling yourself, too easy to get yourself out of it. Telling your spouse, perhaps depending on how your spouse feels, right, how much they're going to hold you accountable. Telling your kids, they're going to be more likely to hold you accountable. They're the ones that are usually the best accountability buddies, as I like to call them. But if you put it out there, you tell your friends, you put it on Facebook, social media, you make it more public. The more public you make it, the more pressure you feel now to deliver on that commitment. So the public piece is a really important aspect. The level of effort that it takes for you to make that commitment, right? If I say, oh, I'm going to lose weight, that's not as much effort, or I declare that, as if I go and join a gym, right? Once I've made that financial commitment and I put the effort into going over there, into signing up, there's more effort put in, and again, more likely for me to be consistent. And then lastly, it needs to be freely chosen. It can't be something that's coerced. You know, you just drag your spouse in with you, or they've dragged you into this, or perhaps you feel just the sense of obligation. It's January 1st, I have to do a New Year's resolution. That will again impact and lower the level of effectiveness. So how does this work? You know how it works personally. How can we make it work with others? So in my classroom, I have group projects. And whenever you work in group projects, especially in school, teams get a little fuzzy in groups, sometimes work well and sometimes not so well. So what I have developed through a colleague of mine is a team charter, where they are committing to behaving and acting in a particular way within the group. They develop it on themselves. They make it public to each other as well as public to me. They're putting in that effort to develop what makes the most sense for their group. And because they're the ones developing it, it's not me saying, here's how you have to act. So there's no coercion with that. So it really does help when they create their own team charters of how they're going to commit as a team member to being more effective in making the group work. Now, is it always effective? Of course not. We're humans. But it does make it much more impactful. When I've done it, I get less group drama. And when I don't do it, I get more group drama and more expectations that aren't met. So commitment, how can you use commitment in Toastmasters? We have member inductions that you can do in your club meetings, or an officer induction. And by giving people and having people declare the Toastmaster promise about attending meetings and preparing for speeches and signing up for roles and being willing to be an officer, if they're publicly saying that, then again, more likely to show up in that way. You can do the same thing for officers. By putting them in a public arena, you can set people up to have a more effective and consistent behavior with their commitment. Now, if you're not doing inductions, you could perhaps, one of the things that I like to do sometimes, especially when I was vice president of education, is have people do table topics, have a big table topics where everyone shares what their goal is for the year. By July 1, what do they want to accomplish with regard to their education goals, right? So you can use that, and by having them publicly declare that, again, someone writing it down, but publicly declaring that, they feel more on the hook. There is more social pressure. So you can find ways to have people publicly commit, and adding a little effort into it really gives people an opportunity to really step into that commitment. And the value becomes that these smaller commitments really create that shift in self-image, right? So you always want to start small and work towards bigger commitments, bigger requests, bigger favors. So you always want to start small and go big, because what happens is that smaller commitment that they've just complied with, right? So they've just said yes and they've delivered on that particular request. It shifts an attitude and creates a different self-image of them with regard to that area. So now that they have a new attitude towards it, they're more likely in this new attitude to take on that bigger project. So starting small with something little that you're asking them to complete, a goal that they have, is much more effective than trying to make something super big initially. So let me tell you how this has worked in a particular study, right? So there was a cookie selling study, some people going door to door selling cookies, and they wanted to see if it made a difference that if they had the first request be just, can I go to your house later and get a yes or a no, right? So if I can go to your house later and sell you cookies, once you get that yes or no, that's the first request. And the second request is then they will, when you go buy some cookies once you get to their house. So just by putting it into 2 requests, they found that 89% of the people agreed to that second request. So by the time they got to the house, for those that they said, yes, come to my house, 89% of those people agreed to buy cookies. It's a very big difference than the 18% that agreed to buy cookies when they did not make that initial, can I go to your house first? And they just went straight to the house. So it makes a big difference when you can simply just put in a small request first and a bigger request. It makes a big difference. It could be as simple as saying, hey, can I talk to you on the phone about participating in the speech contest? Or can I set up a time to talk to you about becoming an officer next year, right? These small opportunities, just by asking people to set up that time and they say yes, they're more likely to say yes in that second request. You can see this, the small commitment making larger commitments, especially when it comes to things like free trials or discounted trials. I'm an active yoga student, and so I see these specials, especially when I go traveling, saying how can I take advantage of any discounts. In this particular studio in Minneapolis, thank you, Imbue, has this great special for new students, right? So getting you into the studio for $45, you can get as many classes as you can get. Once you start to change that attitude about who you are as someone who practices yoga, you're more likely to then stick with yoga and pay for more classes. So it's a great discount initially to get people into a new attitude of how do they feel about yoga, and how do they feel about themselves practicing yoga. Especially for 30 days, you can make a big difference in how you feel in a yoga studio. So there's ways that you see this out in the world as a sales strategy, but you can also use it in your area of focus. Toastmasters, you can easily ask people to be vote counter first if they're a new member. Then they can step up into table topics. Then they can step up to be Toastmaster. Now, this makes obvious sense because there's building of skills that happen with this, but it also slowly builds their self-esteem, builds their confidence, changes their attitude of what it means to be a Toastmaster, how to participate and to engage, what it means to contribute. So all of these areas make a big difference. You can take these areas as well and apply them to a team project that you have going on at your company. There's all sorts of ways you can build in small commitments to get to those larger commitments. And as leaders, you're also building people up through success, building their self-esteem, building their self-confidence, giving them platforms of success so that they can truly build to their full potential. So while it works from a strategic standpoint, it also works from a very holistic standpoint. So how can you use this rule of commitment and consistency with your area. So take a moment now, write that down. You don't want to lose that thought because you're going to get more information coming at you when we start to wrap up. So I want to make sure you've captured that concept, anything that has come up, and if there's any other pieces, you may get stuck. We're going to shift to Q&A in just a second. So if you have any places where you're feeling stuck and like, I don't know how to apply this, put it into a question. All right, and when you have that idea and you feel like you've captured it, go ahead and raise your hand so I can get a sense. Fantastic. Excellent. Great, great, great. All right. So these rules of influence are powerful weapons that you can put in your toolbox as a leader. And one particular rule may speak to you more than others. Some are easier to implement than others. Commitment and consistency can be a tough one to strategically do, but there are simple ways you can apply it. And there may be ones that feel like, man, I already use that. Fantastic. Now you can strategize and use them more effectively, more purposefully to really get your needs met and to get that yes to your request. And with that, I turn it back to Cynthia. And as she gets on, think about what questions you may have, because we're going to raffle off our book, but definitely we're going to get to some Q&A, and I want to make sure to answer all your questions.
Share my webcam. Do that and window. All right. Terrific. Wow, I got so much out of that. I don't know if you can see my webcam or what's going on with that.
We can see your webcam.
Okay.
Dawn, I think you were going to present, show your slides so that it made it easier for Cynthia to do the Q&A. So it should be coming, switching over in a second.
Okay.
Dawn's working on that. So go.
Okay. Great.
Yeah,
Doing that.
Dawn's getting yourself set up.
Okay, I loved your presentation, Sarah. I got so much out of it, so much stuff that I can use. And while you were talking about the liking, there's a quote that just sticks with me. It goes with me everywhere. And this is something that I was, I don't know, astonished by a couple of decades ago. Dale Carnegie said, "You can make more friends in 2 months by being interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you." And I think that just really speaks to what you were talking about. And another thought that came up while you were talking was, you talked about the volunteering and getting in, and man, some of the best experiences I have had in Toastmasters have been going into somebody else's club and being a judge or being a timer or being in anything. And going to other clubs gives you such an opportunity to see how other people do best practices that you would never get if you didn't volunteer. So some people might think, oh man, do I really have to volunteer to do this? All I have to say about that is you can get so much good experience by volunteering and going into somebody else's club. Not only are they grateful and happy to see you because you're helping them out, but you get the chance to observe and learn really cool new stuff.
Absolutely. Okay. There is multiple benefits to all of this. I was trying to hone in on the strategy particularly, but yes, absolutely. It's multifaceted for sure. And there's multiple benefits to
Good
even
stuff.
Sure.
Reciprocity, liking, commitment, and consistency. Really great ideas, really simple and clear ideas for how to make things happen in a positive way. Okay, John, I saw you pop up there for a second and then disappear. We're going to do our raffle for Influence, Science and Practice by Robert B. Cialdini. This is Sarah's choice. And Sarah, your job, you got to pick a number. We've got 71 people. Number 1 already won. So you got to choose another number between 2 and 71. And then John will do his magic and figure out who that is for us.
All right. And I will say that this book is definitely worth picking up if you aren't the winner. It's a small book, easy to read, and definitely powerful. And this is where I get all of my rules, all the rules from that we talked about. So they'll go into more depth. And I'm going to go with 28, John. So if you can get your abacus out.
Number 28. We'll work on that. I have the varsity ice swimming team stopping by to help me with that count.
Awesome.
Excellent. They have really good timing, I understand. They do things well together as a team. So if you can switch us to the next slide, please. John, we're seeing your screen. So if you can switch us forward to Q&A.
I'd love to. There we go.
Okay. And those of you, again, if you're having any problems, technical difficulties, text your question to John at 520-419-3959. All right, questions. Here's a really interesting question.
Oh, good. I like interesting ones.
How do you get past feeling bad when asking someone to help you in Toastmasters when you know they are busy and you don't want to be taking advantage of your friendship?
It's a really great question. I think what I found, because when I was designing this, there were times that I was like, oh, can I really ask my speakers to create a promo video? Can I ask them to do 30-minute coaching sessions as a raffle? Like, I felt that they were already giving so much. How can I ask for more? And I would say that one of the things that helped me kind of balance that out is seeing how I could make it beneficial for them, right? So asking them to offer their coaching sessions, and in exchange, they'd be able to offer their services to whoever that winner may be, if that person so chooses. So I think that if you can make it mutually beneficial when you're asking someone to do something, or even say, hey, I'll owe you a favor later, if that's the case, so that it feels like there's a reciprocity that goes back and forth. That piece, I think, makes a big difference to kind of relieve some of that sense of obligation. And I would say the other piece is really making sure that that person can truly say no. And you make it clear to them that if they are too busy, that they can say no, right? That they don't feel obligated out of your friendship to feel like they have to say yes. So if you can make it so it is freely chosen, right? So that commitment doesn't feel coerced, right? So they're freely choosing it and they don't feel like they have to say yes. Then again, you can set that part up as well as the reciprocity aspect, so that the liking doesn't take too much of the relationship. So I just used all three rules at once, and hopefully you followed along.
Terrific. Okay, well, Colleen, thank you for that question. Here is a question from Molly.
Okay.
Have you found that focusing on how to use these various tools has also had you grow as a leader, and that you learn to be more specific in your ask and tailored to the recipient in your approach? And that's coming from Molly.
I found that I am more strategic. Now that I know the rules, I am more strategic about how do I want to make this particular ask? What's going to be the most effective way for that particular person to make that ask? Is it someone who has a strong liking, and so it's not going to take that much? Or do I need to build in smaller commitments to make that ask because it's a bigger ask that I'm looking for? So I try to think about what is going to be the most effective with that person. And of course, it takes time to practice, to refine and hone those skills and figuring out how do you make that request. So what I would suggest to anyone as they're starting to practice these rules is take assessment afterwards. What worked? What didn't work? How can I tweak it, right? Just like we do for a speech evaluation. Same thing when it comes to a request is kind of assess what worked, what didn't work, and how can I make it even better next time and more effective next time.
Terrific. Here's another question from Kenneth. As a project manager, are there any other approaches to getting things done? In essence, we just need the team to do their jobs, so we may not always want to employ reciprocity or friendship. You just
Sure.
want the team to get it done, so you don't want to be their friend and you don't want to employ reciprocity. How are you going to get things done?
I think it can, as a project manager, it can be difficult because you're managing a lot of people. You may or may not have relationships with them, but they do need to get their job done. What I have found, I think even if I don't want to necessarily be friends with them, I still need them to like me in order for them to get things done for the project, if I'm the one that's kind of the face of the project. So I would still try and see if you can invest even a little bit of time to build relationships with some of these people, especially the people that either aren't turning things in on time, or they're slow, or it's not quite what you need it to be. Building those relationships can allow you to have more frank conversations with them about what's working and not working, about their role and their duties on the team. So if you build the relationship, not necessarily friend, but just finding some commonalities, spending some time to find out more about them as a human being, as a person, then it can benefit you. And while we feel like, oh my God, we don't have enough time for that, it does come back tenfold, really, when I have a student that I'm struggling with and I'm like, you just need to get your work done. You need to turn in your homework. You need to do better on your test. Like, I find that if I take 5 minutes to sit with a student and connect with them on an individual basis, then they do much more work for me. And so it works. And reciprocity, again, isn't necessarily your go-to. You could also use commitment and consistency by giving them, rather than putting in, maybe they have one huge, large task that they have to do. Maybe you split it up and you ask them to do smaller pieces of it and give them to you in smaller bites. Can often be more effective, and they feel like they're contributing more versus feeling like they're not delivering time and time again on the bigger issues. So those would be my suggestions. Project management is tough. It's a lot of people, a lot of personalities, and the relationships have really allowed me to be more effective, and could be for you.
Thank you. Those are all really good questions, and thank you to all of those of you who sent in questions for us to play with. We're coming up on a break here, so I'd like to, before we announce the winner of the raffle, I'd like to go ahead and ask you your fun question.
Okay.
We finished the webinar. You step outside the office and find a lottery ticket that ends up winning $10 million. What would you do?
So many things. I think what comes to mind immediately, and this is not quite on the fun, like frivolous side, but My dad, as I was mentioning, has some failing health issues. And so I would definitely give a whole lot of money over to my parents so that he feels taken care of and my mom's not burdened as being the main caretaker, and that there's someone there so that he can feel fully supported and my mom feels fully supported. That would take a huge weight off of my back, my shoulders, as well as theirs, and they would be much happier. And then I would travel. I would travel as much as I can during my semester breaks, and get away and go and explore. My sister does it. She travels to Australia or to Cuba or to Thailand or to Bhutan, and I feel like I don't have the money to do that, and I get so jealous. So I would be the one traveling and learning about different cultures and experiencing and sitting on the beach a lot,
What's
and
the
getting
first
feet in the
place you
sand.
would go? What's the first place you would go?
Fiji just popped in my head.
Ooh, well,
Especially right now. I just left warm California to come back here to 20-degree weather, so I want to go back to some warm tropical weather.
beautiful, beautiful. Well, maybe you can use Mary Ann's steps for making things happen, and why
There
not
we
find yourself
go.
in
All
Fiji?
right. And Dawn's won't power will probably get me there too.
Awesome. Okay, we've got just a moment here to find out who the winner is. So, John, if you would throw up that slide. Who is the winner of the book from Sarah?
The winner is John Cardazzi. John Cardazzi, you are our winner for round 2.